It began with what seemed like an ordinary custody hearing. The courtroom was packed, as family disputes often bring more spectators than one might expect: friends, relatives, curious onlookers, all quietly whispering and waiting for the proceedings to unfold. At the center of it was a young girl, no older than 12, called to speak in front of the court about her living situation. She was small, but her posture was upright, her eyes steady, as though she carried a secret confidence most children at her age did not possess. The judge, an older man with years of experience on the bench, was known for his sharp tongue and impatience when children or nervous witnesses took too long to answer. To him, the courtroom was a place of efficiency, not a stage for drawn-out emotions. When the girl was asked who she felt safest living with, she answered in a quiet but unwavering voice, "With my mom. She's strong, she's a seal." The courtroom fell silent for a moment, then erupted with muffled laughter. The attorneys on both sides exchanged skeptical glances, some spectators chuckled, and even the bailiff struggled to keep a straight face. A seal? The idea of this delicate, soft-spoken girl having a mother in the Navy's most elite Special Operations Force seemed absurd to almost everyone in the room, and the one who reacted most dismissively was the judge himself. With a smirk tugging at his lips, he leaned forward and repeated the girl's words aloud. "Your mom is a Navy SEAL?" His tone carried mockery, as though the child had just told a fairy tale. "Sweetheart, do you even know what a Navy SEAL is?" The little girl did not flinch. She simply nodded and replied firmly, "Yes, she's one of them. She trained hard, she fights for our country." The judge chuckled, shaking his head as if amused by the child's imagination. "That's quite a story," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. The court reporter paused, unsure how much of this to record verbatim, while the attorneys shuffled their papers uncomfortably. To them, it was becoming a distraction, a child's fantasy interrupting the serious business of law. But just as the room settled back into its rhythm of disbelief, the doors at the rear of the courtroom opened. The sound was sharp, echoing through the chamber, and every head turned. What happened next was the kind of moment that leaves an indelible mark on anyone who witnesses it. A woman in uniform walked in, tall, composed. Her presence alone commanded silence. She wasn't wearing a business suit like most parents in family court. She wore her Navy uniform, decorated with insignias that told a story of years of sacrifice, training, and service. She walked with the calm confidence of someone who had seen the unimaginable, who had endured hardships that most people could never fathom, and she was the mother the little girl had just spoken of. The judge's smirk froze instantly, his eyes widened, and for a rare moment, his commanding presence faltered. The attorneys who had quietly mocked the girl suddenly straightened in their chairs, their laughter dying in their throats. The spectators who had whispered jokes were now dead silent, as if the air itself had been pulled out of the room. The mother walked to the front, her boots clicking with precision against the polished floor, and stood tall beside her daughter. She didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. Her very presence was louder than any argument could ever be. The judge, who had moments earlier dismissed the girl with arrogance, now found himself at a loss for words. She looked at him steadily, her expression neither hostile nor deferential, just controlled strength. "Your Honor," she said in a calm but unwavering tone, "I am Lieutenant Commander of the United States Navy SEALs, and I am her mother." The courtroom was transformed in an instant. What had moments earlier been a stage of mockery had become a place of revelation. The judge cleared his throat, trying to recover his composure, but it was too late. The power dynamics had shifted entirely. A little girl's truth, doubted and laughed at, had just been proven in the most undeniable way possible. The attorneys now scrambled to adjust their strategies. No longer could they paint the mother as unfit, absent, or incapable. She wasn't just a parent, she was someone who had endured the most grueling training in the military, who had fought for her country, who had carried responsibilities that dwarfed anything inside that courtroom. The narrative of the case had changed in a single entrance. The judge attempted to regain control, but the weight of his earlier mockery lingered. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly aware that his credibility in the eyes of those present had taken a hit. He had underestimated not just the child, but the woman standing before him, and now, he was forced to face that mistake. The girl, still seated on the witness stand, looked at her mother with pride. Her words, once ridiculed, had been vindicated. She had been telling the truth all along, and the entire courtroom now knew it. The proceedings continued, but they would never carry the same tone again. Every argument made by the opposing counsel was weakened by the knowledge that this mother was no ordinary parent. Every doubt raised about her ability to care for her daughter fell flat against the image of discipline, courage, and commitment that her uniform represented. What makes this story remarkable isn't just the dramatic reveal, it's the lesson it carries. A child's voice, often dismissed as naive or unreliable, carried a truth that reshaped the very foundation of a legal battle. Authority, embodied in the judge's mocking tone, was humbled in the face of undeniable reality, and a mother's quiet strength spoke louder than any ridicule ever could. But this moment didn't exist in a vacuum. To understand its full weight, one has to consider the sacrifices that had brought the mother to this point. Few women had ever become Navy SEALs. The training alone weeded out nearly every candidate. It required enduring weeks of hellish conditions, pushing past physical and mental limits, surviving on willpower where the body wanted to collapse. This was not just a career but a calling, one that demanded everything and gave little in return except honor and brotherhood, or in her case, motherhood, carried alongside the duty of service. Her daughter had grown up not always with her mother present, but always with the knowledge that she was serving something greater. There were deployments, absences, long stretches of silence where communication was impossible, and yet, whenever her mother returned, the bond was unshakable. The girl knew her mother wasn't just strong in the abstract sense, she was strong in the most literal, tested ways imaginable. That's why when asked where she felt safest, she answered without hesitation. For her, the safest place was not a particular house or neighborhood, it was with her mother, who had proven again and again that she could survive anything. The judge, though chastened, tried to maintain the rhythm of the hearing, but it was impossible to ignore the undercurrent that had now gripped the room. Every word spoken was weighed against the presence of the SEAL mother, who stood as living proof that assumptions can crumble in a moment. The attorneys who had prepared arguments about instability or questionable parenting found their strategies hollow. How could they claim weakness in front of a woman whose very uniform testified to resilience? As the hearing drew toward its close, it was clear that the tide had turned. The girl's testimony, once mocked, now seemed prophetic. Her words had carried the truth long before the court was ready to accept it, and when the judge finally gave his ruling, his tone was markedly different. Gone was the smirk, the dismissive attitude. In its place was a deliberate, respectful cadence. He ruled in favor of the mother, granting her custody, acknowledging that the environment she provided was not only safe but profoundly stable. The ruling was met with a quiet murmur from the spectators, but no one dared laugh anymore. The judge had been humbled, the attorneys silenced, the whispers erased. What remained was the image of a child who had spoken the truth and a mother who had embodied it. When they left the courtroom, hand in hand, the silence followed them out. Everyone present knew they had witnessed more than a legal proceeding. They had seen a lesson in humility, respect, and the danger of underestimating voices that seem small. News of the case spread quietly at first, whispered among legal circles as a story about a judge who had mocked the wrong child, but it didn't stay quiet for long. Soon, articles appeared in local papers, recounting the dramatic moment when a Navy SEAL walked into family court and silenced the room. Commentators debated it on radio shows, blogs shared it with sensational headlines, and within weeks, it became a viral story online. Some people focused on the judge's arrogance, others on the resilience of the child, but most marveled at the mother herself, a symbol of service and strength who had stood proudly in her uniform not to fight an enemy abroad but to defend her role as a mother at home. For the little girl, the outcome meant more than legal custody. It meant that her truth had been validated in front of everyone who had doubted her. The laughter she had endured was replaced by respect, not only for her mother but for her as well. She had learned a lesson that day, that speaking the truth requires courage, and sometimes the world will mock you before it believes you, but if you stand firm, the truth will speak for itself. The judge never lived down that moment entirely. For years, it was mentioned in quiet circles, a cautionary tale for those in authority to never dismiss a child's words out of arrogance. He continued his career, but he did so with a new layer of caution. A reminder forever etched in his memory of the day a little girl and her Navy SEAL mother walked into his courtroom and shattered his assumptions. And for the mother, it became one more mission in a life filled with them. She had fought battles overseas, endured training that broke stronger men, and stood shoulder to shoulder with warriors, but none of those moments compared to the victory she achieved in that courtroom, the victory of being recognized as the rightful protector of her daughter. This story endures not just because of its drama but because of what it teaches. Authority should never become arrogance, mockery should never silence truth, and the strength of a mother, no matter her profession, can sometimes outshine even the highest authority in the room. Because in the end, it only took one entrance, one shocking, undeniable entrance, to silence a room and rewrite the story.